In episode 31, remember Mandora and Quick Pick from episode 10? Well, guess what? They're back. So the story begins with the Jolly Rogers. That's the name of the pirate ship that's in outer space. So there's Mandora now on her electrocharger. Oh, by the way, in this episode, we're about to meet Captain Cracker and his robotic parapsychic Polly in just a minute. So back with Mandora, now that she's inside the spaceship, she met up with Captain Cracker on the space bridge and his robotic parrot sidekick. So after she introduced herself, Captain Cracker asked her, "Is there a problem?" Well, Officer Mandora knows what to do. She enlisted Cracker with a bunch of felonies and charges, just like what any officer would do. Now you can tell that Captain Cracker was very shocked about these charges that Mandora was giving him. So she says, "Where's your paperwork for this? Where's your crew?" Well, Captain Cracker just claimed his case to say he didn't have any, but we all know that's not really the case. But Mandora had no idea that someone was watching her, but she was unaware of it. So after Captain Cracker claimed his case, that's when Mandora says, "Okay, we'll have to put it down for inspection, so the ship will be checked out." So, being curious, Captain Cracker wanted to know, where are we going to take it? Well, Mandora was more than happy to take Captain Cracker and his ship to the Great Planet Prison, which is not that far away. But Captain Cracker said that there's a problem. The defense shield is up. Well, Mandora can take care of that with her decoder, of course. Luckily, she brought it along. So after Mandora had pleaded a case to say with the decoder she can gain access inside. "Of course, officer," Captain Cracker said. So long story short, Mandora agrees to contact the Great Planet Prison for the ship's inspection. So meanwhile on Third Earth and at Cat's lair, so in the control room we have Lionel and Snarf. So when Snarf showed up, and that's when he was asking Lionel, "You're listening in?" Well, to answer Snarf's question, that's when Lionel says, "It's Mandora. She's bringing in a freighter," or so she thought. But she had no idea that what she's bringing in was a pirate spaceship. But Mandora was not aware of it yet. So Lionel made a suggestion to get a closer look on screen, so he did. So he was asking Snarf if he'd seen a freighter like it before. "It's an old neutron drive," Snarf said, or so he thought. But then he said, "Wait a minute," because he sensed that something was off. And that's when Snarf recognizes that ship anywhere with a bunch of galleons. So he said, "That's the Jolly Rogers." "The what?" Lionel asked. Then Snarf explains that the Jolly Rogers was the name of the ship that Captain Cracker used to have once upon a time, he said. According to Snarf, he said that Captain Cracker was once exiled once upon a time too. So Lionel wanted to know from Snarf, "You don't suppose that Captain Cracker's still around, is he?" "Well," Snarf says, "if that were the case, if I were you, I'd warn Mandora right away," he suggested. So following Snarf's suggestion, that's what Lionel did. He contacted Mandora on a freighter, or so he thought. So he told Mandora after she says, "Go ahead, get out of there," Lionel said. "You're on the..." But then a voice interrupted. Lionel says, "That's right, the Jolly Rogers." Lionel should have realized. Yes, it's true. That voice belonged to Captain Cracker himself. Now remember, he's the same robot pirate that Snarf spoke about to Lionel on Third Earth at Kessler's control room. So Mandora is face to face with Captain Cracker all by himself. So when she was about to attempt to arrest him, that's when he says, "Not likely you will," he said. Remember the robots that Mandora saw on her way into Captain Cracker's cabin? Well, that's when Mandora should have realized that what Captain Cracker said was a lie, and that those robots were part of his crew. So back with Mandora, she knows what to do. She throws a boomerang at one of the robot pirates. Well, it knocked it on the head, which caused it to collide into a wall. So back with Mandora, she told Cracker to give it up, or else all the robots will be deactivated. That's when the second robot stepped forward to attack. But Cracker says, "Wait a minute, it'll damage the controls." So Cracker says, "Okay, officer, you win, but I'm pretty sure we'll work something out." But instead, Cracker just locks her into the control room. I forgot to mention that Captain Cracker's ship is now inside of the penal prison. So anyway, back with Captain Cracker, he told his robotic pirates and of course his parrot psychic that it's now time to go on with a plan. And what was that plan? To create a prison raid. So that's what happened. So back with the robot pirates that just left Captain Cracker's ship, one of the first things they did is they overpowered the prison guards. Back with Mandora, who's still locked in the ship's control room, she made an emergency distress call to say that the planet prison is under attack. Finally, good news for Mandora, she receives a transmission in the Kessler's control room on Third Earth with Lionel. Go ahead, Mandora, Lionel says. She says, listen to me. I'm trapped inside of the ship's control room, and there's no way out, she said. She also says that there's some worse news. The robotic pirates are taking over the prison and attack the guards. What can I do? Lionel asked. Get here ASAP and hurry, Mandora said. So meanwhile in the Kessler's control room, that's when Lionel told Mandora that there's a problem. There's not an intergalactic vehicle that's available that can take him there. So Mandora says, pay attention, listen up. I'm going to send my electro charger to you, she said. Now for Lionel, this is good news. Also the good news, according to Mandora, the electro charger will be done by remote control. So all Lionel has to do is to punch in the coordinates in the control room at Kessler. So he did. So, back with Mandora's electro charger, just like as she said and planned, it left from a pirate ship, the Jolly Rogers. Now, the robotic pirates that saw this happen were confused. So, after leaving the penal planet, the electro charger is now on its way to Third Earth. Suddenly, the prison's alarms went off, and then Mandora says, oh no! So Lionel says, what happened? What's going on? So Mandora says there's some worse news. All the prisoners that were locked in their cells are being let out, she said. Then, as Mandora continues to explain, they're all of the worst criminals that have been put away and from different planets. And let's not forget Quick Pick from episode 10. He's there too. So now, according to Mandora, they're now running loose in the prison. So while that's going on, meanwhile in outer space, Mandora's electrocharger is on its way to Third Earth. So meanwhile, back at Cat's lair and on Third Earth, there's Lionel now. He just left the control room moments ago, and he was waiting for Mandora's electrocharger to arrive. So good news, after the electrocharger arrives at the lair, Snarf had this bad feeling but then suggested to Lionel that maybe he should go along with him. But Lionel refused and told him that there was no other way. He doesn't have any choice. The reason why he's going? Well, Lionel just explained to Snart that Mandora's in distress. She's in danger. Well, Mandora's always in danger, Snart said. Well, that's the part of the business that she's into, Lionel said. And so he heads off. So Snart says, please be careful. So meanwhile, back with Mandora in the Jolly Roger's control room, that's when she heard the voice of Captain Cracker saying, come on out, or we'll blast you out. But Mandora says, no, you won't. This is your ship. This is your only way out of here, and there's no way you're going to blow it up. After Captain Cracker thought what Mandora said, he says, well, you're right about one thing. Then Captain Cracker says, we do have another way of getting in. You do remember Quick Pick, right? So there's Quick Pick along with See-Through and Rhinosaurian. So long story short, after Quick Pick had made his case to say he wanted to serve his time and etc., that's when Captain Cracker says, you have a choice. Either you leave this ship, or I'll take Quick Pick apart with the help of my friends over here. So what's your decision? So Mandora had her turn to plead a case to say, there's no way you can threaten me. So both Rhinosaurian and See-Through are taking Quick Pick apart, one piece at a time. So Quick Pick panics and says, no, no! And that's when Mandora says, all right, stop this, she said. So Mandora says, all right, I'm coming out. And so she did. So Captain Cracker says, you made a wise decision, and then told Rhino and See-Through to escort Officer Mandora And so they did. So Captain Cracker also made a case to say we should have a special welcome for her. Well, meanwhile, back with Lionel on the electro charger, he's now in outer space, and he had just arrived at the gray planet Pino prison, which unfortunately has been raided thanks to Captain Cracker and his crew. So back with Mandora, now that she's escorted out of the Jolly Rogers, she's with Rhino and See-Through, and she was approached by Captain Cracker and his parrot sidekick. So Captain Cracker went first to speak in his case to say, well, 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 if it isn't the pride of the forest. What have you done with Quick Pick? Mandora asked. Where is he? Well, Captain Cracker was going to say he was right there, but then when he looked over his shoulder, Quick Pick's gone. So after finding out that Quick Pick is missing, that's when Captain Cracker sends Rhino out to get him. And says, when you do, bring him here, and make sure you boil him in oil with Mandora, Captain Cracker said. But what the bad guys didn't know is that Quick Pick was right above them. So back with Lionel on the electro charger, trying to find his way into the great planet penal prison, and luckily he found a way in. But by the time he did find his way in, he accidentally hit Rhino from the behind. And by the time he landed the electro charger, Lionel went to see what happened. But just when Lionel got closer to find out what's going on, that's when Rhino woke up and puts his hands on Lionel's shoulders and began squeezing him. Things were looking bad, but that was until suddenly someone threw a cape over Rhino's eyes. So now that Rhino had realized that he has a cape over his face, that gives Lionel a chance to escape. So we know who that someone that threw a cape on him, and that someone is Quick Pick. Now earlier he manages to get away from Captain Cracker and his crew, so he joins up with Lionel. So back with Quick Pick, he made his case with Ronald to tell him to be careful with that cape because it was a gift for him and etc. So when Ronald went ahead to charge at Quick Pick, Lionel jumps over him, and that's when Ronald was chasing Quick Pick. So, long story short, now that Quick Pick has avoided a couple of charges from Rhino, Rhino went back to the cell, but there's a problem. He couldn't push the door by himself, so Lionel went and helped him, and Rhino was locked up once again. So Quick Pick was asked by Lionel who it was and what it was. Well, Quick Pick explains that that was a rhinoceurin, or rhino for short, and he was one of the most dangerous criminals, and there's more to them right here, Quick Pick said. Well, Lionel just let slip to Quick Pick that he heard that the criminals are on the loose already because Mandora had already sent him a distress message. So Quick Pick made a suggestion. Why don't we take the electro charger and then get out of here, he said. But Lionel declined and said he wants to find Mandora first. Then Quick Pick says, well, even if we do find her, there's a problem. They said that creep Captain Cracker, she's probably boiled in oil right now, he said. So after Lionel have heard the bad news from Quick Pick, so he tells him, you can stay behind if you want, but I'm going after her. So he heads off. But then Quick Pick had a second thought. He says, hey, wait for me, and he runs to catch up with him. So Quick Pick, after he ran to catch up with Lionel, he asked him, you do have a sword, right? Well, Lionel not only said that he does, but there's a problem. He said that the Sword of Omens will never work in this prison. And the reason for that, according to what Lionel said to Quick Pick, is because of the magnetic field that surrounds it. Then Quick Pick pleaded the case to ask a question. You mean we had to battle these bad guys on our own? He said. So meanwhile, in the prison's kitchen, we have Mandora all tied up and on a hook and about to be dumped in boiling oil. With her was Captain Cracker, his crew, and his parrot sidekick. Things are looking bad for her. So back with Lionel and Quick Pick, long story short, they had just arrived at the prison's landing area. But Quick Pick told Lionel that it's a bad idea to break inside because the reason being, there are a bunch of robotic pirate guards everywhere. And worst of all, Quick Pick says, they're all armed. Well, Lionel pleaded a case to say that there must be another way somehow, he said. Then Lionel asked Quick Pick a question. You do know how to pick other people's locks, do you not? Who, me? Quick Pick asked. Then Lionel pleaded his case to say, either you guess in the easy way or the hard way, he said. So meanwhile, back in the prison's kitchen, things don't look so good for Mandora when she was about to be dumped in boiling oil. In a giant pot, of course. So, back with Quick Pick and Lino, though it is confirmed that Quick Pick had took the prison's keys, so all he has to do is find out which one of them opens the door. Although, according to Quick Pick, he made extra keys just in case, so Lionel tells him, well, what are you waiting for? Stop gabbing and start doing something. Well, back with Mandora in the prison's kitchen, things are looking bad when she is about to be lowered into the pot of boiling oil. So back with Lionel and Quick Pick, they're now on their way to the prison's kitchen. Now here comes the hard part. According to Quick Pick, he hasn't had any idea which way that he wants to go. So Lionel asked him, will you make up your mind? Well, back in the prison's kitchen with Mandora, and of course in her case, things are about to get worse. So, long story short, back with Lionel and Quick Pick, well, good news, they made it up the stairs. So now all they had to do was get inside the prison's kitchen before things are looking more worse for Mandora. So as Quick Pick went over to the controls, Lionel looked inside the kitchen prison's door, and what he saw was horrifying. Mandora were about to be dumped in boiling oil, and if that's not bad enough, there were robot guards everywhere, including Captain Cracker and his parrot sidekick. So Lionel knew that there was no time to lose, so he told Quick Pick to open the door that leads to the prison's kitchen. Instead, he pushed the button, which is the orbit brake, and that causes the alarm to go off, the lights to flicker on and off. And so Lionel says, you have pushed the orbit brake button, he said. And if that's not bad enough, Lionel just told Quick Pick that this great planet prison is going to be off the oblivion if something isn't done quick. So back inside the prison's kitchen, well, good news, at least the pot of boiling oil was tipped over, and that would cause Captain Cracker, the pirate robot guards, and of course See-Through to evacuate immediately and back to the Jolly Rogers. So off they went. So back with Quick Pick and Lionel, thanks to Quick Pick, he finally opens the door to the prison's kitchen, but he finds it weird that it was empty. But luckily for him and Quick Pick, they found Mandora, so that's good news for them. And that was right after Quick Pick says, I knew what I was doing in the first place. So back with Lionel, after he threw the sword at the rope, it cuts Mandora free. Luckily, he catches her in the nick of time. So back with Captain Cracker, he was on his way to the ship known as the Jolly Rogers along with his crew and See-Through. And that was until he looked over his shoulder and saw that Lionel saved Mandora. Well, back with Lionel and Mandora, who was in his arms, he gives Mandora the quick pick and says, here, take her. And so they left the prison's kitchen. So back with Lionel, he's face to face with the bad guys. And that's when he told Quick Pick to get Mandora out of here. And so he did, and along with Mandora. So after they headed out, Quick Pick closes the door, so that leaves Lionel alone with the bad guys. So back outside the prison's kitchen with Quick Pick, he unties Mandora. So while Quick Pick is doing that, that's when Mandora told him to hurry it up because she says that this could mean bad news for Lionel if he boarded aboard a pirate ship. Well, just like Mandora feared, back with Lionel, he boarded aboard the Space Rogers with his robotic crew, his robotic parapsychic, and See-Through, one of the criminals. So the Jolly Rogers had left the Great Penal Planet prison. Back with Quick Pick and Mandora, when they saw that the pirate ship had left already, that's when Quick Pick says, oh, gee, I guess we missed it. We'll never catch him now. I wouldn't say that, Mandora says. We can use my electro charger. We can pursue from there. So that's what happened. So meanwhile, back at the Jolly Rogers with Captain Cracker and his robotic parapsychic and See-Through, one of the criminals, and they're holding Lionel prisoner. Well, Captain Cracker just let slip to Lionel that the next location was their Earth. When Lionel heard that, he said, what? So Captain Cracker says, "You've heard right. Once we reach there on Third Earth, and then by nightfall, we'll plunder over Cat's lair." Well, for Lionel, this is bad news. Long story short, after Mandora and Quickpick are looking for the electrocharger that's parked inside the prison somewhere, back with Lionel on the Jolly Roger surrounded by the bad guys. Captain Cracker, his parrot robotic sidekick, See-Through, and a bunch of robot pirates. And that's when both Captain Cracker and his robotic parrot sidekick had a plan for Lionel to get rid of him. And by how? Forcing him to walk the plank, of course. So back with Quickpick and Mandora with good news, they found the electric charger. Back with the Jolly Roger in outer space, we have Captain Cracker, his robot parrot sidekick, and the rest of the bad guys. Things look pretty bad for Lionel when he was forced to walk the plank. Well, long story short, things are about to look bad for Lionel. When back with Mandora and Quickpick, now that Mandora has her electrocharger, that's when Quickpick started to plead his case to say even if they can reach Lionel in time, there's no way they can catch him. But Mandora soon dismisses Quickpick's plea and said that this electrocharger can catch them a lot faster, she said. So Quickpick has his turn to plead his case to say, "I was afraid you'd say that." So now that both Mandora and Quickpick are on an electrocharger, they soon left the penal prison. Back with Lionel on the Jolly Roger, that's still in outer space, things are starting to look worse for Lionel. Well, back with Quickpick and Mandora on the electrocharger, that's when Mandora pleaded the case with Quickpick after Quickpick had made his case. That's when she says that the Jolly Roger has got to be around somewhere, and she's not kidding. So back with Lionel still on the Jolly Rogers in outer space, but he won't be for long. I forgot to mention he was blindfolded at the time. So after he was forced off the plank, guess who decided to rescue him? It's Mandora and Quickpick, and they're on the electrocharger. Well, good news, they rescued him. But then Lionel told Mandora the bad news. He just heard from Captain Cracker that he's going to attack Cat's lair. So after Lionel had pleaded the case to say there's no way he can contact his friends, so Quickpick asked him a question. "Will your sword help out?" Well, good news, Quickpick had found Lionel's sword, and Lionel was in shock. Well, Quickpick has his turn to plead his case by letting slip to Lionel that on his way out with Mandora, he picked up Lionel's sword on the way. So, thanks to Quickpick, Lionel does what any good guy would do, just like what he always did, project a Thundercat signal from his sword. So back on Third Earth and at Cat's Lair, the rest of the Thundercats that saw the signal went into the Thunder Tank. So now that the Thundercats know that there was no time to lose, the Thunder Tank is now on its mission. So meanwhile, back at the Jolly Rogers, it had just arrived on Third Earth with Captain Cracker, his robotic parrot sidekick, his robot crew, and of course See-Through, the criminal that just left the great planet penal prison just moments ago. Well, not only did they arrive on Third Earth to plan an attack, but the bad guys had no idea that the Thunder Tank is also there. So back with the Thunder Tank, and as I said, it just arrived at the scene just as the Jolly Rogers did. So in the tank we have Chitara, Panthro, Tigra, the Thunder Kittens, and Snarf. Now Tigra just saw on the screen that the Jolly Rogers had just arrived. So back with the Jolly Rogers that had just arrived, one of the first things it did, it lowers the gangplank so that the bad guys can plan their attack. But by surprise, remember the Thunder Tank that was also there? Well, it too has a surprise, a net launcher. So what it did is that it launched the net and captures all of the bad guys, including See-Through, which is one of the criminals. So yes, it is true. Thanks to Lionel's friends, all of the bad guys have been captured in the net. Also thanks to them, their Kessler had been saved, and so was their Earth. So by the time that Mandora and Quickpick had arrived, well, let's just say that the Thundercats took care of that situation. So yep, you've heard right. Captain Cracker, along with his robotic crew and See-Through, are now going back to the Great Planet Prison. But before they do, what Lionel wanted to know from Mandora, how did she manage to get all the rest of the bad guys back in their cells? Well, Mandora just lets up to Lionel that she didn't, and that the reason why is because she says that Quick Pick had already taken care of that situation when he pressed the wrong button before he left with Mandora. Now, Quick Pick had pleaded his case to agree with Mandora. He says, well, it's very simple. Well, Mandora happens to agree with Quick Pick. So, what Lionel wanted to know from her if Quick Pick will receive a full pardon. Well, she said she wanted to talk with the governor to have him paroled early for good behavior. Even better, according to Mandora, Quick Pick will be allowed to assist her. Then it's Lionel's turn to tell Quick Pick that there's some better news. He gets to ride with Mandora on her electro charger. Well, that made Quick Pick very happy to hear this news. And of course, what Lionel wanted to know from Mandora, what was Cracker's punishment? Well, his parrot sidekick, Polly, had made a better suggestion to have Cracker boiled in oil to see how he liked it. But let's just say that Mandora will take care of that by taking him to the Gray Planet Panel prison where he belongs, along with his crew members. So that ends episode 31.